Yeah. Is there
I
somebody?
think there was someone who was waiting.
Okay, I think I got him.
Thank you. Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And thank you everyone for being here too. I know people get busy, but this is a pretty good turnout, so I appreciate it. So when I created this whole presentation, we did have a different program before, but to me, it just wasn't efficient. It wasn't working because it was all about explaining to kids about what bullying is, what bullying isn't, and what they should do, which is really, really important. But with, again, everything I've been looking into, everything I researched, all the books and podcasts and everything I just looked at, really focused on encouraging our kids to be empathetic, to be kind to one another. So when I would go into schools, which is something that you parents can do in your own homes, is encourage your kids to be kind to one another, especially right now during the holiday season. And not only that, but just being 2020, with everything that's been going on, I think it's a really good time to remind our kids to be kind to one another, to treat others the way they would want to be treated. So I'll explain a little bit more. I'll show you a stats about why that's so important. But as you can see here, the objective for this whole program, parents and kids, was to prevent bullying in hostile situations by creating a kindness culture and to encourage our students to stand up against bullying and make our children resilient to criticism. So towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk about what resiliency is. I'll briefly go over it. There's so many more resources out there on resiliency. So if you do want to learn more about how you can protect your child, you really do want to look into resiliency and how to prepare them to become a resilient person. Because unfortunately, and this is something that I cover with kids, is that no matter how much we try, even if we, make ourselves great people, there's always going to be someone who hurts us intentionally or unintentionally. So the best thing, of course, to protect yourself is to be someone resilient, protecting themselves from criticism. It's going to be how they react to that, and also how they see the people who bully them, which is one of the top questions that I would ask kids. And I would always do it in a big audience, which you guys can do it, of course, in your own family, talking about it. And the question would be, why do you think kids bully you? Why do you think kids bully other people? Why do you think people hurt others? And they know the answers to that. They will tell me, and it's always good from peers to hear it from one another. They would say, it's because probably they don't like themselves. It's probably because they're being bullied. Maybe they don't have a great home situation. Maybe they're jealous. I mean, when kids start to hear that, they start to also understand that it's not always just about them, which again, as being someone who was bullied as a kid, you always think that it's because of you. If I look different, or if I was a different person, or, if this, if that you take it very personal. So when they start to hear all these other answers and reasons as to why bullies do what they do, then they also start to understand, okay, it's not necessarily me, it's also them. And then it's easier for them to also react a little differently, more resilient to that criticism. And some of the things that we're going to be covering today, really understanding what bullying is. And I know probably everyone that's here today has kids from all ages. So this, what I'm going to tell you, is really going to apply mostly to those who have younger kids. I mean, kids have been hearing the word bullying since they were little. They think they know what it is. They think they know what it's not. And also sometimes when someone hurts them, they think it's bullying, but it's not always the case. So I'm going to show you this little graphic that we have, that if you want to take notes, I think the best thing, especially if you are on a phone, is to take a screenshot of it so you can use it whenever you're talking to your kids about it. So they could, again, understand what bullying is. We're going to talk about empathy, how that's helpful, resiliency, and because unfortunately we have seen a relationship between bullying and suicide, we are going to talk about what some of those signs are. If you're interested in knowing more suicide awareness and prevention, we do have a separate program on that, and you can visit our website, azag.gov, because we have a bunch of webinars throughout really, we always schedule them for every single month at different times and days if you are, again, interested in learning more about that. I will say that when someone attempts suicide due to bullying, it's rare that it's only that one factor. There's usually other factors that go into play as well. And then, of course, when I'm talking about everything that I've said, everything that I'm about to say, start thinking of an action plan. Hopefully you'll never have to use it, but it is best to prepare. So I'm really happy that Shannon is here, because it's also going to be really important for you to know and be aware of the policies that are in place at your kid's school, because even though I've talked to many schools, I also do know that every school has a slightly different process. So I'm glad that she's here to support you guys. So bullying, as you've probably heard before, and as your kids know, bullying is repeated, unwanted, hurtful behavior where a person or group is perceivably stronger or holds some sort of power over the person being bullied. So that's just perceived behavior, right? It's not necessarily that they're stronger, but it's just perceived behavior. And again, with bullying, when it's considered bullying, there are some key words there. It is repeated behavior, and it's intentional. They wanted to intentionally hurt that individual, and they knew they were hurting that person. There are different types of bullying: physical bullying, which is more common with boys, verbal bullying, where, not necessarily speaking ill of that person, cyberbullying, which can happen with any electronic device, and it is very common right now. So I'm glad that Tiffany's going to be talking to you guys about all of the popular apps, because it's also very important for you to be supervising your kids' applications. One of the things that we say is for you to be familiar with the capabilities of your kids' phones and apps is for you to also download all of the apps that they're using, so you can know what's possible to do on those apps. And then, of course, the indirect bullying, where not a lot of kids think it's bullying, because it's where a group of people or a couple of people talk bad about another individual, even though that's not directly, being said to that person. It is hurting their reputation, and then in a lot of the cases, it does come back to that person. So this is a graphic that I was talking about. Is it bullying? And again, this one is especially for kids who sometimes will mention all the time. Like I said, I'm a parent, and my kid has said, "Oh, they're bullying me. Oh, they're a bully." But then what's important in those types of scenarios is to not overreact, and also to calmly say, "Okay, can you tell me the scenario? Can you tell me what happened?" So you can hear the details, and then you would then, know if it's a situation or if it's not, if it's just someone being rude or someone being mean. So when someone says or does something unintentionally hurtful and they do it once, that's rude. And when someone says or does something intentionally hurtful and they do it once, that's mean. And something that I would always share with the kids when I would talk to them is, unfortunately, this continues to happen even from adults. Sometimes adults will say things, maybe unintentionally or intentionally, and sometimes they don't realize how it's going to affect the other individual, because maybe to them it was funny, maybe to them, they see it as teasing. So, just as we say, watch what you say, think about it before you speak. Same thing applies to text messages, since we do see that a lot happening, the cyberbullying. And then, of course, when someone says or does something intentionally hurtful and they keep doing it, they know that it hurts us, we've told them to stop, but they continue to do it, then that's when it's considered bullying. Now, I will also say that even though those top two doesn't necessarily mean that they're not bullying. It does not mean it's okay. It's still an acceptable behavior. There should be a zero tolerance for that, and they should still be reported, because of course, if it continues to happen, then it can start to develop as bullying behavior. Now, I just want to briefly mention a couple of things about sexual harassment, because this is also something that happens in schools, and sometimes it is mislabeled as bullying, or sometimes it's underreported, and unfortunately, it's also normalized behavior. It does happen where students may unfortunately, it's been really sad. Some of those stories that I've read where someone sexually assaults someone on school campus. And just like with bullying situation, it's the kids that see those situations or hear about those situations before adults even get to ever know about them. Because like I mentioned, they are underreported. Some of that can be groping or any unwanted or unwelcomed physical contact, and then even gestures or written or verbal unwanted physical contact. So, we should talk to our students that it is not okay. It is not okay, and especially when someone says no, well, no is no. And same thing, I want to mention a little bit about hazing, just because, again, sometimes people confuse it with bullying. So hazing is any action taken or any situation created intentionally that causes embarrassment, harassment, or ridicule and risk emotional and or physical harm to members of a group or team, whether new or not, regardless of the person's willingness to participate. So these cases are very common, just like that definition says there. It is very common with clubs, with sports, athletes, both girls and boys. I mean, this even happens all the way up to college. Sometimes they think that, again, they normalize the behavior because it's seen as something normal. It's seen as tradition until, unfortunately, someone ends up severely hurt or worse, right? The intersection of bullying and hazing. So how are they different? So bullying excludes the target from the group, whereas hazing is a ritual or process imposed on a person who wants to be part of the group. Bully often acts alone, but hazing usually involves a group, team, or organization. So in order to, now that you guys have the definition down and different types of bullying, and hopefully you also explain this to your kids, we need to be able to recognize this bullying, obviously, to stop it. And again, I'm going to show you a stat a little bit. That is one of the reasons why I mentioned it's important not only for adults to do something about it, but our kids too, because like I mentioned, they are the ones who usually see it happening first. And that's something that I discuss with kids. I have them raise their hand. Tell me who usually sees bullying happening first, or who knows about it. Is it you guys, or is it the parents or teachers? And they say it's us. Absolutely. And also, who has the most power to actually prevent those situations? And you might be surprised by this answer, but it's actually students. Because if students let it happen, if they enable it, the bully is going to continue, unless, of course, which is, I know it's not very common for kids to stand up to it for various reasons. But if they do it safely, or they report it anonymously, if they do fear, are afraid to report it, those situations usually stop. But that's one of the other things that I talk to kids. Like, if you know that these situations stop when you interfere, why aren't we doing it? And they do explain to me, well, it's the minority opinion. We're going to start getting bullied next, which is just a belief, right? Or they're going to make fun of me for doing it. And then I also have kids share with me the stories when they've actually interfered in those bullying situations. And most of those cases are actually pretty successful. In fact, they will share with me, which again, that's one thing that I miss about having that audience with the kids, because when they hear from one another, they start to realize, okay, so it's okay to speak up. It's okay to help my peer, even though I don't know them or I'm not close to them, right? Because then they hear that they end up being friends, or that they're seen as a hero. I mean, really, there was a boy that I got to meet. I believe it was exactly almost a year ago, where this boy actually was the bully. They even, he was from a school from Phoenix. They actually did a news story about him, was aired on TV, and they talked about how he was a bully. And he actually explains, like, I was a bully because I was having a really hard time at home. My parents were getting a divorce. I was taking it out on everybody else. And then he also started to notice that No one liked how he was acting and how he was behaving. He started to lose a lot of friends. Even though he was getting the attention he wanted, it was negative attention, which again, that is also one of the reasons why kids sometimes bully, because they want that attention, right? So he started to actually change because no one was accepting it. They were standing up to that behavior in a way by not getting close to him anymore, by being scared of him. And he did not like that. So what he actually started to do is the complete opposite, which again, doesn't happen a lot, but he actually started to be the defender of those who would get bullied from other students, from other bullies. So I love that story because first of all, it's in Phoenix, and when you hear a local story, it like hits closer to home. But he was someone who was the bully and then started to see the effects of when his peers wouldn't accept him, and then started to change and was seen as a hero. Like his actual peers would call him that because he would defend those that were a little bit younger than him. So that's why it's important for us, but again, also for our students to recognize what some of those signs are where a kid may potentially be experiencing bullying. So I will also say that not every student who is a victim of bullying will show some of these signs. I remember when I was bullied, like I was still having great grades, I actually still had some so-called friends. And again, I didn't show a lot of these signs actually. So also, it's important for you to understand that. So it could be declining grades, sudden loss of friends, a low self-esteem, self-destructive behaviors, changes in eating habits, difficulty sleeping, maybe, they even have nightmares, unexplainable injuries. Maybe you ask them about what's going on, how they got their bruise, and their reason is pretty illogical. Lost or destroyed personal belongings. And the very common one is faking sickness or an illness. Maybe they wake up every day and every morning, it seems like they don't want to go to school. They have a headache, they have a stomach ache, but that it's not necessarily that they're lying. Of course, that could be the case, but it could also be the case that because they know that they're getting bullied. And the other thing too is that I've had a lot of parents tell me, I've taken my kid to the doctor. There's nothing wrong with them. They've ran tests. Nothing's wrong. What's happening? It doesn't mean that they're lying. It doesn't mean necessarily that nothing is physically wrong with them, but psychologically. They could be experiencing anxiety. They could be experiencing depression. Your body recognizes what happened, so their body is reacting to that. They could start getting sweaty. I remember personally that, I would need to use the restroom every time I would have to go to school, and it was for that reason that I knew what was going to happen, so I was nervous. And then, of course, talking about suicide, which it's not always going to be verbal. It could be by text messages. It could be the music that they listen to. It could be some of their behavior, which again, I'll welcome you to look at one of our programs. We do have pre-recorded sessions if, you're not able to make any of our suicide webinars, because there's a lot of information on there that you could definitely find useful. And then just like we should be able to recognize when someone is possibly experiencing bullying, we should also be able to know when someone is a bully. And what you will learn in the suicide presentation is that it's not just kids who are victims of bullying who will contemplate suicide or attempt suicide, but it's actually students who've also been the bully, who are 1.5 times more likely to think or commit suicide. So again, that just shows you the problem that it's not just the victim who, where bullying situations affect the victim, but also the perpetrator, also the person who does the bullying. Okay, so I have a question, and that is, how common or uncommon is it for students to actually tell parents that they are being bullied? I don't have the actual number, but I will tell you that it is very uncommon. It is not common. Something that can help, which is much easier said than done, is having a good relationship with your kids and open the channels of communication. I know I said it wasn't going to be easy, right? Especially if they are teenagers or probably even before hitting teenage years. The reasons they don't report it, and it's the same thing. They don't report bullying situations. They don't report when someone sends them an unsolicited, unwanted message online. They're afraid to get their technology taken away, because some of these cases are cyberbullying. They're afraid that if they tell you, you may react in a certain way, which is why I said earlier, like, if they tell you they're being bullied, don't overreact, because I know sometimes as parents, we try to go like, bear mom or bear dad, and because they're our kids, we are their advocates, we want to defend them. So I totally understand, but that's why it's important for us to, like, okay, tell me the details, let's talk about it. But then aside from that, even if you do react in a way where it's not, overreacting, they still probably know that you're going to tell someone at school, right? And that it's going to get to that student, and they are afraid of retaliation and that nothing's going to get done. They think that the problem is going to continue. So that is like one of the biggest reasons that kids actually tell me when I would go to schools, that's what they would tell me, that they're afraid of it becoming worse. So unfortunately, that is what's happening. But something that is also very simple but could help you, open those channels of communication between you and your child, is instead of asking them every day when they get home from school, or when they're done with virtual learning, hey, tell me something you learned. Hey, how was your school? How was school? What'd you learn today? And they will always say the same thing, right? Oh, nothing. Oh, same. Oh, it is what it is. Ask them, tell me something positive that happened today, and tell me something negative. And of course, you could kind of change that wording a little bit. What was your favorite thing that happened to you today? Just to kind of make it your own, because that way they actually have to start thinking about it. And, it will take a little bit of time for them to actually start to opening up. And if you start this as a teenager, it might be a little bit harder for them to open up too. But if you continue to do it, it will get easier. And then you'll even be surprised that one day when you forget to ask them that question, they might automatically on their own tell you, hey, mom, do you want to know what my favorite thing was? Or, hey, mom, do you know there was this thing that made me uncomfortable? Like, it actually does help. And I've heard that from different psychologists and counselors. And I personally do it with my daughter, and I've seen that it does work. The other thing too is, like, when you have conversations with your kids, we used to have a program called Guiding Good Choices, where it was like a drug prevention program. And one of the protective factors, not only for, trying to get our kids, prevent them from using drugs, but this method could actually be used for anything that we want for our kids. It was to create a bond between you and your kids, which, again, easier said than done. But the technique that they used was also very simple, which was having weekly meetings. And it could be short, and it's having the entire family there, even the little one, the 2-year-old, talking about not always harsh topics, not always about bullying, not always about sexting, not always about drugs or whatnot, right? Because then that will be too much sometimes. But on certain days, and your first weekly meeting could be, let's plan what we're going to do this weekend. And again, having the smallest kid even participate. Hey, what do you want to do this weekend? And, just planning something together, because that is really going to help create that protective factor, which is bonding and that communication between the entire family. My 4th grader is more than happy to share who got it. That is very true. That is very true. But you know what? You could also use that as, oh, really? Like, you sounding like you are very interested. Like, oh, what about the good kid? What about this? What did you do? What did you learn? And having them also teach you what they learned, because then they also know, okay, my parents are interested. And that's what they want. Kids want them to see that you are very interested. They love gossip. Yes, they do. My favorite icebreaker after school is, who got in trouble today? I love it. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Use that. Thank you guys for sharing, because this also helps other parents with ideas. So the other thing too, which again, what we want to encourage not only to students, but to parents as well, because we obviously have a big part of this too, because we're also online. We also set the example for our kids. You know, it's not just bullying situations at school that set the example of in the way that we react, but it's also bullying situations or trolling situations when we're online, right? Teaching our kids like, hey, I'm gonna block this person because they're being mean and I don't like how they're acting, or I don't wanna see this, I'm not gonna let this get to me, right? Once they see that, you know, they're also gonna be thinking the same way when they come across something like that. Because, you know, as parents, you know that you could say something a million times, but they probably won't do it. But if they see you do something, obviously it's true. The phrase monkey see, monkey do. I mean, when you do something and your kid does it, and then, you know, you say no, what do they say? Well, you do it, right? So they're watching us. So setting a good example of reporting these situations. And I remember in the last program we had, there was a video, which it was kind of a PSA, and I wish we still had it, but I don't remember where it is. And I'll just, you know, visualize it. So there was the parent in the kitchen, and then there was 3 students, right? And they were all there. The mom was, you know, cooking or whatnot, cleaning something is what they had her do. And there was one kid who started saying really mean things to the other girl. They were saying like, you're so ugly, look at your teeth. And, you know, I heard this about your mom. And everyone was just staring at the girl, not telling her anything. And the PSA, the whole message was like, if you would see this in person, you would say something. But sometimes we don't say anything when it's happening online. And remember, right now, our kids are online. And sometimes, you know, we just kind of keep scrolling through those mean messages, right? So again, we could set an example by, you know, helping them learn how to report that online, or just reminding them like, you know, if it's happening to you, delete it, block it, because it doesn't help you seeing it all the time, or trying to wrap it around your mind, like trying to get some explanation as to why they did that to you, if it's happening directly to them. So some things that we can do if we see it happening in person is intervene immediately. And it's okay to get help, you know. Sometimes these situations, and I think it's also important to also realize like the bullying that even I experienced is a lot different than what kids are experiencing today, you know. And I would say that I think it's a lot harsh today. Unfortunately, it is. So it's okay to get another adult to help and to help you intervene if that's what you need. Separate the kids involved, make sure that, you know, they're both physically, mentally okay. They might even say, I'm okay, you know, I'm fine. But even if they look like they're okay, it's still going to be really important for you to talk to them about the process everything, because again, it might seem like they brushed it off easily, but they might be thinking about it later, or even start thinking, well, I should have done this instead, or I should have done that. So it's really going to be important, you know, and also take it as a moment for them to learn something, to take away some things. So, you know, process it, talk about it. And also do the same thing for the bystanders, those who witnessed it, because unfortunately there is also research that shows that bystanders, those witnesses who saw these bullying situations and maybe reacted in a certain way, or maybe didn't react, sometimes actually end up also getting bullied, or have feelings of guilt that they should have done something. And then again, same thing, model respectful behavior. So this was the stat that I actually wanted to show you guys earlier. I should probably move it a little bit sooner, but I don't know. I just think it's very impactful. It's something that I share with students a lot, and that's 57% of bullying situations stop when a peer intervenes on behalf of the student being bullied. And again, how many of our kids are doing that, you know? And that's why I do miss these class audiences. You know, I would have 200, 300 or more at a time, because they need to see by raising their hand, how many of them are actually intervening, you know, and it wasn't a lot. I mean, I'd probably have in a group of 150, maybe just 4 or 5 raise their hand. But at least they can see that someone's doing something about it. So, you know, encouraging our kids that it is possible to do something, that they have more power, again, more power to stop these situations than sometimes teachers do. Because unfortunately, teachers and parents, administrators, we come last sometimes, right? Trying to help something, even though what we're doing right now is obviously trying to help prevent this, which is also very essential. So it's also important to continue to, just with any of our topics that we have, because it is in a prevention aspect of it, to discuss this with your kids, any topic. And again, you know, this is something you can do in those weekly family meetings that hopefully you start to have. So this, with this topic, obviously make them or help them understand what bullying is. You know, you can use some of those first slides that I had in the beginning. Talk to them about what it is, what it isn't, how to stand up to it safely, because I also understand that, like I said, kids are very harsh these days, and I've seen some of these messages that they sent one another. I mean, there are, in the teenager presentation for bullies, I share some pretty harsh stories on there. And the reason I share them, and I also share some positive ones, is because I want them to see these stories and just see it from like an outside person, because obviously it's different students that they do not know, so they can't like judge them, right? Because they don't know that person. I want them to be empathetic. I want them to like put themselves in that person's shoes. And some of those stories that I share with them, you know, did end up in death by suicide, unfortunately. And they always go completely silent. I mean, this could be an audience of 800 kids and they go completely silent. And I tell them, like, what would you do if that kid was here? You'd hug them, right? You'd want to be there for them. You wouldn't want them to do that. You feel obviously something. And it's like, what do you think your peers are feeling? What do you think your friends are feeling? Like, they're not any different. They're the same age as you guys. Like, again, you guys can do something about it. Sometimes we think we know our peers because we see what they post online, or because, you know, there's rumors about them. But remember, we only know what people actually want us to know, right? Or what they're posting online. It's not always 100% true or the reality. So talking to them about standing up to it. But like I said, some of these messages can be like, go kill yourself. You know, I mean, it's harsh, but that is what they're telling each other. So if they don't feel safe, you know, we've told kids, as long as you report it to a parent, the parent can at least tell someone at the front office. And, you know, obviously Ms. Shannon's going to go through it. Like, maybe Ms. Shannon, you can talk about how if it's possible for them to do it anonymously, if that's something that kids would be more comfortable with. But again, we really want to encourage them to do something about it. And, you know, again, keeping those lines of communication open when your kids do talk to you, something that is very helpful. And the same thing, we say this because it is very effective when we talk to our kids about suicide. When they're venting or talking to you about their day or talking to you about their problems, a lot of the times kids just want you to listen. And of course, as parents, we want to tell them all the solutions. Okay, you do this, do that, do this, do that, you know, but again, sometimes they just want someone to listen. They just want you to hear them out. And sometimes that alone, again, every situation, every kid is very differently, but sometimes that alone, just taking it all out, it actually helps them process it. And when they say it out loud, it actually, like, they see it in a different perspective. Okay, maybe I feel better. Maybe it's not that bad. You know, it really goes a long way.
We have a question in the chat. It says, are there particular grade levels when bullying is more prevalent among kids?
So I see it more, and again, sometimes it's research because I don't think all the students report it. I see it more in Arizona. I see it more with elementary school, middle school too. Now, when it comes to high schoolers, it's more common for them to bully one another. It's just, so it happens in all levels, okay? But the bullying is just very, very different. I feel with high schoolers, they reported even less because of the type of bullying. There's a lot of sexting involved in there. There's a lot of those types of comments, or did you see what she did? Or did you hear what she did or he did this weekend? There's a lot of that. And again, they also have the pressure of, oh, this isn't supposed to bother me. You know, oh, I'm not supposed to report this because I'm not being seen as tough. There's a lot of that stigma. So that's why I would say, like, I don't know how accurate that research is, but from what I've read and from what I've seen in our state, it's more common. The same thing with the administrators that they tell me it's usually coming from elementary schools. But again, that does not mean it's not happening in high school or that it's not common there. Let me see. I think there's other questions.
Yeah, we've got another one about, do all schools have mandated reporters, and what qualifies as a mandated reporter?
That one I would leave to Shannon, because I'm not very familiar with the mandated reporters for school. So I will leave that to Shannon.
Hi, do you want me to jump in and answer?
Yeah.
So, okay. So yes, everybody that works in the school is actually considered a mandated reporter. So if a student reports something along the lines of that would equate to putting them in an unsafe situation, possible abuse, neglect, the person who received that report is required to report that information. So sometimes, you know, our teachers, for example, may not feel comfortable, so they may go to the nurse or to a social worker or a school psychologist, you know, for advice, and that person will walk them through the reporting, but they are the ones who actually report that because they were the ones that had that conversation with the student.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know there's another question there from Julie. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. So I do cover that. That's a really good question. Again, you know, educating our kids about this topic, just like with any other ones, and starting early, it's going to be best if you plant this little seed about not tolerating, you know, having a zero tolerance at home about, you know, not hurting another person, or, you know, talking to them about empathy, compassion, putting that seed in their brain from when they're little, when they're little. That's going to be really helpful, because it's not just important to talk to them about, you know, how they can protect themselves, but also how they should behave with others. Talking to them about the effects of social media, you know, sending certain messages, because again, sometimes they may think about a message in a different way that we may see it. Like, hey, did you not realize that could have had legal consequences or social consequences? Did you not think that could maybe hurt another individual? And the same thing with not processing their own feelings can have consequences in the long run for them. You know, I talk to kids about, you know, maybe you know someone who's freaked out about something so small, and it's not that one thing really freaked them out. It's because, you know, they have not talked about or processed all of these other things that have accumulated in the past. Like, that's why, you know, it's okay and it's really healthy to process and talk about all of your feelings, all of your emotions. So that's another thing that we as parents can do, you know, be the emotional coach for our kids, because not many of us adults probably learned how to navigate our emotions. You know, our parents always told us, do good in school, do this, don't do that. But many of our parents probably didn't tell us how we should react in certain situations, and those skills. And I know a lot of schools are teaching kids how to be, you know, emotionally, socially intelligent. That's very, very helpful. They're doing that because they know that's missing in a lot of us. So some of the consequences for being the bully, which some of these things can continue up to adulthood if they don't get addressed now. Violent behavior, substance abuse with drugs and alcohol, school consequences, which I think Shannon could probably cover if you guys have questions about what that is. Legal consequences, where here in Arizona, bullying is considered harassment. So again, that's a good thing that you can talk to your kids about, because, you know, they hear the word a lot. Bully, 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 not a big deal. It happens to everybody. It's part of school, right? But it's not. It's not. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we should not normalize that, just like bullying has been normalized in movies. You know, they see it all the time there. So it's important for them to remember, like, especially now, because a lot of cyberbullying cases are happening. Judges are getting more and more of these types of cases, and they are prosecuting these cases. So that's why, you know, it's important for them to know the cause and effect of these social media behavior that they may do. They could be charged with the crime, a fine, jail time, and then of course criminal record. There have been kids who are not 18 and they've been charged with it as an adult. And you could probably even use the Michelle Carter case. So Michelle Carter, even though it wasn't a bullying situation necessarily, Michelle Carter, this case got like national attention. I mean, even got global attention, because she was going out with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend actually, you know, had mentioned something like, hey, I'm going to kill myself. And instead of her trying to help him, don't do it, hey, I'm here for you, you know, or whatnot, she actually texted him back, do it. You always say you're going to do it. You never do it. Not only that, but she actually told him ways of how he could do it. And unfortunately, he did die by suicide. And she actually got a criminal charge, which was a homicide charge through an electronic device. So when kids hear those stories, they know that it's possible to get criminal charges through an electronic device. I mean, she got that criminal charge of basically killing someone, even though it wasn't with her bare hands, it was through a text. And then of course, even though she only got 15 months of jail time, which is not a lot for in some people's opinion, you know, something that I tell kids is that that's going to affect your future. She's not going to be able to get a job that she wants. People are going to know her name. Obviously, it's all over the news. It's all over the internet. If you look her up, she'll come up. So there's also consequences for that person being bullied. Low self-esteem, feeling helpless, hopeless, substance abuse with drugs and alcohol, poor social functioning, poor school performance, and anxiety and depression. And some of these effects that I just showed you, these consequences can also happen to bystanders. So that's just kind of telling you a little bit more, some of the consequences for kids bullying another individual. And again, that includes an electronic device. So who can you report it to if this is happening? So the thing that we always recommend is knowing the policy of your kid's school, how they take it, what the process is, because again, you know, every district can be slightly different, but you do have the right to go to a teacher. And especially now, which I probably, I don't know about you guys, I don't know if you guys are staying home. I think the last time I heard, I think you guys are staying home. But, you know, before I would get a lot of complaints from parents saying, well, they never get back to me. You know, I've called, I tried meeting with them and they don't get back to me. Teachers are really busy, but you can use it as to your advantage, you know, email them, because in that way, everything's documented. It has, you know, a time of when you sent it, and then also a response or no response, right? Because I mean, like I said, I've heard it all. I've even heard stories of where, you know, the kid that was bullying that person's kid was actually, the parent of that bully was actually the teacher, and that's why they didn't do anything. I mean, I've honestly heard it all. And I've heard that the principal was involved, and that's actually from someone who used to work with me at the office. And the way that I actually, because I used to, like, again, I used to work with her, and I didn't hear it from her, even though she knew I did bullying prevention. I actually heard it on the radio. The story was just crazy to me. And then out of nowhere, you know, we reached out to each other, and she ended up telling me that that was her daughter. And I know someone here asked me, like, what can you do if I took it to the school? Nothing happened. I didn't get the support. You know, you could always go to the superintendents. I've had schools tell me that, I've had parents tell me that it wasn't until they went to the superintendent then things finally got done, which I understand that it's unfortunate that not everything gets resolved at the local level, at the school level, but you also have to remember, and this is also for me, something that I have to remember, but we are the biggest advocates for our kids. No one else is going to fight for our kids like we are. Again, every case is different. There's a lot of miscommunication that can happen as well. I've heard it all. So I've also heard where schools have called me and said, hey, we need this program here because the superintendent already told us, or I don't know if it was the Department of Education that told them, I think it was superintendent, that if we get more kids taken out of school due to bullying, they're going to shut our school down. That's a huge problem, right? I mean, they can't control it at the school level. That's a bigger problem there. So again, I've heard it all. So hopefully you don't have to go through all of that, taking your kid out of that school and putting them in another school. But again, if you really see that that's the only option, and as a parent, that's the only option, then of course you're probably going to want to do that if that's really the only choice there, right? And then if there are photos that are sexually explicit photos circulating about your kid, or maybe your kid is receiving threatening messages, then I would take photos of those messages and show them to law enforcement. The only thing is that if your kid receives a sexually explicit photo, that's the one thing we don't want you to take a screenshot or share those photos, because even though you didn't solicit that image and it's another person's kid and they are a minor, then that could get really tricky there for you guys, okay? So I'm just saying that if it's your kid's photos, tell law enforcement that is happening. Okay, I hope that answered your question. And let me go back to the chat and look at that question that was there. I want to make sure that I covered everything. I usually always have a lot of questions in that slide. Why is chat not popping up? I don't know why chat's not popping up. Let me go here.
Do you want me to read it to you?
Yes, please. It's not popping up for me for some reason.
Okay. It says, if parents have taken all of the steps you mentioned to get the problem addressed at the school and the school administration refuses to address the matter, what can parents do to help their kids and get it properly addressed?
Yeah, okay. I feel like I answered that question, but let me know if you have further questions in regards to what I said.
And I think maybe Shannon can also.
Yes, please, Shannon, if you have anything to fill in, regards to what I said, please feel free to come on in.
Absolutely. Do you want me to answer that now, or do you want me to wait until the end?
No,
Okay.
I think we should, just in case people have to leave.
Okay. So typically, if you feel like you are not being heard from your assistant principal or your principal, what we want you to do is come to support services. And so you can report that information to me, and then I will circle back around and complete another investigation, make sure that a safety or a support plan is in place, make sure that your concerns are being addressed. If you feel like you're still not being heard, at that point, it would probably escalate to the superintendent. But I like to work with families, and so far I have a pretty good record of being able to mediate, the differences perhaps between families and schools. So I really hope that people would feel comfortable coming and sharing that information with me. Our goal is to make sure that all of our schools are safe and supportive environments for our kids. And if something is happening on campus that is making a child feel like they are not safe, or they don't belong, or excluded, harassed, bullied, any of that, I want to make sure that those concerns are being addressed. Your child is probably not alone. Perhaps, there's other kids. And so we want to make sure that just from a systemic, place, that we are really addressing those concerns.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
So now if you have any other further questions, feel free to add them into the chat there. So we're going to go into empathy, and that's being able to understand and share the feelings of others, which I think a lot of people, I've seen adults, 2020, they lack some empathy. So I think it's something that we could really teach our kids, because we're in this together. Honestly, this pandemic, I think we've learned a few things. I have hope there. And yeah, it's just a good time for us to teach our kids to be empathetic. It's important for them to know their emotions, to be able to acknowledge their emotions. And that's why, like I mentioned, it's important for you to be their emotional coach. And children who are better at regulating their negative emotions tend to show greater empathetic concern for others. Now, how can you show empathy? Well, like I said, be the emotional coach for them. Acknowledge your children's feelings. I know it's a challenge when, especially if you're working from home. Trust me, I know firsthand. When you're working, or when you maybe are trying to do stuff around the house and your kid comes to you and it's something insignificant, right? And it's so easy to maybe dismiss them. We're doing them a disservice when we do that. But trust me, I know that's difficult, but it's important, even if it's something small, to acknowledge their feelings and help them help them navigate through those emotions, and engage them in the conversation. That, again, if we don't, help control our emotions when we're angry, when we're upset, that can harm our body. It really does harm our body, our immune system even. Which, again, that's why I think now better than ever, we can help our kids be mindful, teaching them mindfulness. Something that can help a lot is writing, especially if they are maybe a kid who, when you ask them, oh, tell me something positive that happened to me today. Trust me, I've had my kid tell me on days, oh, nothing good happened. Nothing happens good in my day, right? When they write, learn gratitude, that actually rewires the brain to start thinking positively, and it also helps with resiliency as well. So same thing, being the example for our kids, being kind to other people, and especially now around this time, which you might be able to find some things to do virtually, to do some sort of volunteer service, or helping other people in need. And raising resilient children, I think this is something that we all want for our kids. We want them to be resilient. I think that's one of the number one jobs that we try to aim for, right? Raising them to be resilient people, having them bounce back when they've gone through something difficult. So we are doing our kids a favor when we teach them to be self-reliant. Which, again, helping them be self-reliant goes with them learning about their emotions, will make them successful children and later on successful adults. So how can you do that? Well, again, just going to cover resiliency a little bit. It's being able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult situations. We all could do this. If you as an adult need help with that as well, you can learn it. You can, it's going to take time as well. Some of us maybe a little bit more resilient than others naturally, but again, we can all try to be more resilient people. I think it's something very, very helpful. And the number one thing is acknowledging, okay, maybe I don't bounce back easily. Maybe it takes me a little bit of a harder time to come back from a very difficult situations. But as long as you acknowledge that and you try harder, it's not going to be easy, but know that, you do have a choice, even though I know that's difficult to kind of a difficult pill to swallow. It's something that I've been learning a lot these last couple of years. I went through this difficult situation, but you know what? I can do it. I can keep on going. But it's just kind of changing that mindset a little bit, and again, that when our kids see us do that it's also going to help them. So teaching our kids what their strengths are, what they're made of, that's also going to help them learn a lot about themselves. That's going to help them become more confident. I think naturally as humans, we always try to learn who we are, right? I mean, my 7-year-old the other day, I was very surprised, and she is a little bit of an old soul, but I'm sure you also have your kids who ask questions that you're like, you're too young to be asking those types of questions. Like, why? How did you come up with that? I mean, she randomly asked me, Mom, who am I? Right? And I'm like, oh man, like who are you? And I try to, explaining and everything that I've learned personally about who I am, who I'm not, what I'm made of, helped me answer that question for her. Like, you're always going to learn more about yourself. This is who you are, but this isn't just who you are. You're so much more than that. And I think, again, our kids, especially teenagers, are trying to learn who they are, what they're made of, especially because they see on their friends' Snapchat, Instagram, like, and I think probably more Instagram, like, oh, look, they're this, they're that. It's so easy for them to like label themselves. They want to look like, who am I? Like, what do I do? What am I good at? And especially because our kids, it's so easy not only for them to compare themselves on social media, but also because obviously if they go to a school, they compare themselves academically too, because they need to have, a certain grade, or they need to read certain words per minute, or, type certain words per minute, or be able to do so many certain math or science or whatnot, or be able to complete so many credits. It's so easy for them to compare themselves that way. And then when they're not doing a great job as the rest of their peers, they start to get down. But we have to remind them, like, even though you may not be doing the best academically, look, you're a great artist. Oh, look, you could do music. Or look, you're able to, build a whole Lego mansion thing. I don't know, whatever they're good at. Remind them. And not only that, but, if they are having a hard time maybe completing that goal that, they need to complete by 6th grade or whatnot, and they're just focusing, oh, I need to be at this level. I need to be at this level. Tell them, look, we're going to start small. Be here right now. You're doing better than you did last week. You know more words. You can spell more words than you did 2 weeks ago. And when they see that they are moving towards their goals, they start to build that confidence. Okay, and something that, again, we could all do, and something that resilient people do, is when something bad happens to them, which it's not always going to be quick for you, okay, especially if this is something that you kind of need improvement on, they look at a problem and say, okay, what's the solution to that? What is this trying to teach me? Basically, like, what's the silver lining, right? Because, again, if we also see the people, the famous people, or the people who are very successful, and this is why I love to talk to kids about it, because once they see, like, oh yeah, my favorite celebrity or singer or whoever they like, they did have a hard time growing up. And I tell them, like, sometimes those failures actually make your victory and success so much sweeter and so much better and so much more worth it. But you wouldn't think that they went through a hard time. We see them and we think, oh, they're going through a grand time, right? And we just see it from a different perspective. So that's why I have that quote at the bottom: fall 7 times and stand up 8. And all of the people here also took, coped a little bit differently. Like Chris Rock, he had a really rough childhood, but he actually, coped with comedy. He added humor to his life. It's not the same for everybody. We can't all do that. And obviously, if you do it in a healthy way, it can be helpful. And now he makes other people laugh. And when he makes other people laugh, it like heals him as well. So he actually has a show called Everybody Hates Chris about his life. And if you were to remove the humor, it wouldn't be very funny. And then the other one too, because I know a lot of people know Taylor Swift. She didn't have a lot of friends growing up. She had a lot of friendships that failed, a lot of heartbreaks. But what she did was started to write down her feelings. And obviously, if she didn't start doing that, she wouldn't be the person she is today. So some other things that we can do too, again, teach them to move towards their goals. Praise, even if it's a small step, because a lot of times, they just want to make you proud. reinforce their strengths and help them trust themselves to solve problems and make appropriate decisions. Remember, when you are asking them, what's the solution to this, or how can we avoid this next time? Ask them those questions, and not always give them the solution yourself, because you're not always going to be there when they're at school and there's a problem. You're not always going to be there, but if they at least remember that question that you'd always ask, okay, how can I solve this problem, or how can I prevent this, or what can I do? Again, it rewires that brain to start thinking that way. And same thing, model resiliency. So this is actually, I did end up adding this. It's just what I was mentioning, that there is a relationship between bullying and suicide, and it's not just the victims who are affected, but it's also those who are the offenders that contemplate or attempt suicide, unfortunately. So what are some of those signs, right? The other thing too is that even though 4 out of 5 young people who attempt suicide show clear signs, as you can see, it's not 5 out of 5, okay? There are cases where there's no signs at all. And sometimes even as parents, we want to kind of put a blindfold on that our kid's not doing that. Not intentionally, it's more like subconsciously, where we just don't see it there. Some of these signs can be that they're covered up. It's not always like, a hoodie during summer days. It could be maybe a lot of bracelets. It's not always in the arms, and it's not always cuts. It could be, burn marks. It could be pinching. It could be bruising. It could be in the legs. Hair loss, that they're pulling their hair or slapping. It could be low mood, little self-esteem, changes in eating habits. I mean, that could be from little bit of eating or normal eating to a lot, and vice versa. Substance misuse, and also destructive or dangerous behaviors. And I was talking to parents about that actually. And there was a couple of parents who, they said that when they were younger, they contemplated suicide, and one of their behaviors was they would rebel. I mean, they were, in their words, really bad kids, teenagers, but, they couldn't talk to their parents about it. So, rebelling was kind of like a call for help, is what the parents were telling me. So here are just some examples that you guys and your kids can do to, take care of yourselves. And just today alone, and I don't know if it's because I'm doing this presentation, I don't see it as a coincidence, but just today alone, I had 3 moms telling me that they're not taking care of themselves, that they're not doing that great. It could be of the stress, it could be of COVID, it could be the time of year, it could be work. I don't know what it is, but if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're also, it's going to be a lot harder for us to take care of our kids. So, make sure this is a good reminder for you, for myself, to take care of yourself. It doesn't have to be going to the spa, right? It could be literally like a little bit of meditation, reading a little bit, listening to a podcast, going outside, maybe early in the morning, taking a cup of tea or coffee, whatever you're into. A walk, something small, but as long as you are taking time for yourself to reflect on yourself and just kind of, getting out of a rut a little bit. But your kids, and I think my favorite one, because I've, again, have been doing, I read a lot about like self-help and psychology books, because I'm just really into that, and it's something so simple, but the thing I've been telling you, having a gratitude journal, like, just do it. I challenge you to do it, and then have your kids do it at the same time as a challenge. I mean, there's all these internet challenges, right? Why not do a gratitude challenges for 30 days, like where every day you write at least 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for. Because again, for some reason, and I know this is another hard pill to swallow, but we are addicted to thinking negatively. We are addicted to like thinking bad about ourselves, or judging, or just hurting, basically. Like I said, it's a hard pill to swallow, but everything I've learned points to that. And, once we start to write and rewire our brain, things that we're thankful for, things that we enjoy, we start to then be addicted to gratitude and being positive. And research, so this is what science shows, that when you are practice gratitude. It makes you happy and it helps with your immune system. So what better time to do that now, right?
Lucia, I hate to cut you off. We wanted
Fine.
to get, this
Let's
is
do
awesome.
it.
We wanted to get Shannon Cronn on real quick.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. When Shannon is talking, if you guys would just want to take screenshots of these last few slides that I have, that's it.
Yeah, that would be great. So
thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to introduce Shannon Cronn. She is the Director of Support Services for SUSD, and she is part of our Social Responsibility Committee. We could not be doing this without her. And she's going to go over SUSD specific information, steps you can take. So Shannon, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here tonight. And thank you for having me on the Social Responsibility Committee. It's definitely a passion of mine, and I'm excited to be here tonight. So, and thank you, Lucia. That was a lot of really, really great information, and some of it was information that I had planned on sharing. So I don't need to. You did a great job covering it, so thank you. So I think maybe what I'll do is just kind of give a summary just in regards to SUSD, I guess our approach to bullying. And it's something that we take very seriously. So in the beginning of the school year, there are only a handful of trainings that we give and that we're required to give live. And every single year, bullying is one of them. And so we first, go over bullying prevention at our admin academy. So every single administrator listens to, if they're new to the district or returning to the district, that, any updates to bullying laws, what our bullying procedures are. So that way, we make sure that those practices are being implemented, consistently across campuses. From there, every single staff member is also required to attend bullying prevention training. And so if they are not able to do it live, then they have to participate in a Moodle, which is a computer, course on bullying. But again, I just wanted to share with you that, it is such an important topic that it's something that, we review every single year with all of our staff across the district. And so really our approach to bullying is looking at how do we prevent this from happening and how do we create safe and supportive environments. And so after a lot of, time spent researching different programs, and this was years ago, what we learned was, by implementing PBIS, that really is a framework where you're creating that safe and supportive environment. You're building relationships, which is going to increase the likelihood that students are going to feel connected to an adult on campus. So if something is going on, whether it's bullying or, perhaps like a threat type of situation, which could, lead to violence on campus, perhaps it's, students harming themselves, it increases the likelihood that they're going to tell a trusted adult on campus and will be able to intervene. And so over the last several years, we've spent a lot of, time and effort really building that PBIS framework on our campuses. So we look at kind of a tiered support model, and that PBIS is setting behavioral expectations. And so teaching students, what's expected across multiple locations on campus. And then acknowledging, those positive behaviors on campus. So we have that, but we also realize that that's not necessarily enough. Students are also in challenging situations. There's a lot going on, in their school life, in their personal life, in their home life, where it's important to teach kids social skills. And so not everybody, just picks up on social skills as being a part of the community. And so we've implemented what's called Sanford Harmony. It's a social emotional learning curriculum, and that's at the elementary school level. And it really, focuses on building relationships, diversity, inclusion, the difference between, tattling and reporting. So all the skills that kids really need in order to, have positive relationships with each other. We talk about, communication skills and problem solving and, getting their needs met. And then hopefully, some of those skills are, carried over into the home environment where parents are asking those same type of questions and practicing the same type of, open communication, open-ended questions with their kids. So, and then also just looking at, if something was to happen on campus, we've trained all of our administrators in restorative practices. And so looking at, how do we repair the harm? And so in a situation where perhaps bullying, is going on, what we need to do first is actually talk to the victim and say, is this a situation where you feel comfortable, bringing the bully and the perpetrator together to repair that relationship, repair the harm, help the bully have a better understanding of kind of the hurt that they've caused, and how to, reteach appropriate behavior so that behavior does not continue. It may stop with, their current bully, but what we don't want is for them to then go find another person, or another victim. We want that behavior to stop. And again, just focus on, building that positive relationship with our students. So those are some of the things that we're just doing from kind of that systemic, that framework approach. Anybody on campus, our administrators, our teachers are trained that if they see any sort of bullying, they are required to immediately report that information to an administrator and then follow up with a written explanation within a day. As parents, and this is something that we know even just from looking at our data, parents and students report that bullying is happening more than our school staff. And that could be because perhaps students are coming home and maybe sharing information with their teachers, and the teachers are unaware. So if that is happening, please reach out to your administrator. It's important for parents to report that information so it can be taken care of, at the school level. I'd recommend that you go straight to your assistant principal. They are the ones that are going to begin that bullying investigation. From there, they're going to follow up with you with a summary or a report of their findings, whether or not it, led to, being called bullying, or perhaps it was maybe just teasing, but still, they're going to follow up with you. And what they're also going to want to do is put some immediate supports in place. And so I know this is difficult to understand sometimes, that we can't always discuss what is happening, with the person who is perhaps the perpetrator, just because of privacy issues. But what we can do is make sure that we're putting meaningful supports in place to protect your child. So on both sides, there's quite a few interventions and supports that we put into place. And so again, what is most important is that we're intervening, putting those, supportive measures in place, and then also addressing and stopping the behavior, from the perpetrator or from, the bully or side. And so if you feel like, at the school level, it was not addressed, or perhaps you still have questions, or, you're concerned that maybe, the supports are not working or they're not enough, or you're unhappy with the results. I mean, that can happen too. Please reach out and call me. I've got a lot of great people that I work with, myself, Matt Lins, who is a PBIS expert and, really kind of our social emotional learning coach for the district. The one of us will go out to the school and again, work with that team to find out, what has been done in regards to that investigation, and make sure that, we're putting meaningful and helpful supports in place. So that's kind of just where we're at from a school perspective. I'm sure there's a ton of questions. Again, we really like to focus on that preventative and do everything that we can so we can prevent bullying from happening, and then, create those partnerships with families. So, students, their needs are being met both at home and in the school environment. So I cannot see the chat. I'm not sure if there's questions.
There are a couple of questions.
Okay.
And I don't know. I mean, we can kind of tag team maybe between Lucia and Shannon, depending on who would be, most appropriate to answer.
Mhm.
All right, so
Oh, one thing I did want to just mention, because this came up earlier in the presentation.
mhm.
So we also look at our data around from the Arizona Youth Survey, which is a survey that all of our 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students take every 2 years. And it looks at all kinds of kind of at-risk or problematic behavior. So it's perception data. So it asks students whether or not they've engaged in behavior such as vaping, substance abuse, riding in a car, with somebody under the influence, physical aggression, and then it also asks about bullying. And what we have found is that the highest percentage of students that report being bullied and then also bullying others is from our 8th graders. And then we see a significant decrease in 10th grade and then again in 12th grade. So our data supports what Lucia had said earlier around, more of that information being reported, when kids are younger. And then just in some of the focus groups that I have ran with students where, I bring that data to students and ask them, questions around, tell me what is happening. Are you surprised by this? Does this feel right? The students have shared that they've experienced the most bullying, in elementary, and it looked very different than it did in high school. Or it looks very different than it does in high school. So just to share that little piece of information with you as well.
We do have a question. It's asking, should parents contact you as the first step if school administration refuses to address the issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of other questions that I'm not sure who is best to answer, but maybe either of you or both. One of them, they both related to what do you do if it's your child that's the bully? How do you address that?
Do you want to answer, Lucia, or do you want me to?
I think Lucia covered some of
Okay.
them. Do you want to answer that, Lucia?
I'm on mute. Oh, I was on mute, but you go ahead and I'm curious to see how you respond.
Okay. So I think what we want to do is, start that conversation with our students, but remember to be calm and to be rational, not, immediately react, and just kind of listen to, their side of the story, what it is, that they're experiencing. And to really, from that point, so that way we have a better understanding of kind of the situation. And then really kind of move that conversation into, teaching them to accept responsibility, for their behavior. And what type of behavior is acceptable, setting limits and teaching them to be kind, helping them to understand maybe the feelings of others. What we really want to focus on is, helping them understand how their behavior impacts other people. And that can happen from, a young age all the way up through high school, right? That, all the way into adulthood. The things that we say and do, have a significant impact on others. And so, teaching them to, engage in those positive relationships or perhaps repair the harm is really kind of where we want that, to head in that type of direction. If that's something that is really, challenging, and maybe, not all parents, are able to, I guess, navigate the conversation in that way, that's okay. We can also reach out to our school social workers or our counselors and ask for their help, setting, some of those goals, or asking the school to, engage in some of those restorative circles or, practices with our students. So it's really powerful when kids, listen to other kids share how their behavior made them feel. It is pretty powerful. I mean, kids are much more willing to change their behavior once they know, how it impacted another person, especially their peers.
Shannon, that was actually my question, and you touched on the component for the children. I think what I'm seeking to understand and try and find the solutions, how do we create an environment where parents can acknowledge their child is bullying or engaging in bully-like behavior? And bully is such a strong and supercharged supercharged word these days. But
Yeah.
I want to know what we can do to foster an environment where parents go, gosh, my kid is being very nice. And I'll be honest, I had a situation a few years ago where one of my children was not being very nice to someone. And fortunately, the other parent and I had a good relationship. She contacted me. We were able to resolve it outside of involving the schools. And I realized that not always the situation. You don't always have a situation where the parents know each other and it can get resolved in that way. But I was impressed that she reached out to me. I was impressed with both of us, frankly, that we resolved it. It didn't happen again. And I am, husband and I sat down with our child and, very candid and open and difficult conversation about accepting responsibility, apologizing, and empowering that other child to kind of boundaries. But I don't know any other parents that, and I'm not too, I guess I'm too married. I'm like, who else does that? Who else can go, my kid was being a real jerk and we're going to have her or him own this behavior. I don't know who else. Well, okay. I mean, I have two good friends on this call. I know you said Jen Cordelli would do that, but I don't know who else would do that. And so I think we kind of need to look at it from that framework, that not that it's okay if it is being mean, but let's create an environment where parents can go, gosh, my kid was really being a jerk and we got to address this and not necessarily shame them, but have them own it.
Totally.
Right?
I mean, you just nailed it. And that is really, really hard. I mean, and.
But is it, it is hard, but I don't know. It wasn't you're being a total jerk. You need to own this. It's not okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe my kids are just more difficult. I don't know.
Right. No, I think sometimes that's really hard. I mean, for parents to acknowledge that their kid is being the bully, or is the one engaging in, some of those problematic behaviors, or, but that is hard. And so I think, perhaps decreasing the stigma, or, just letting them know that, hey, we're not judging you as a parent. We all are in difficult situations, or, find ourselves in situations where we don't know how to navigate, and trying to support them, through that might be helpful. Sometimes I find that, I have to reframe messages, depending on who I'm talking to, because there are going to be parents that are just not going to be open to hearing that.
Right.
And that's the challenge. I mean, and this is something I often say is, sometimes we have to change adult behavior before we can change kid behavior. And
I want to give credit to the parent that contacted me. It was a mom, and I just thought the way she's like, listen, my kid said this. I don't know, maybe he or she did something to provoke it. And if by any means, if he or she did, let me know, and I'll, we'll address it. But the way she went about it was so, non-judgmental, and hey, if there's enough blame to go around in this situation, we're, kids, there, a lot of times in these situations, there's enough blame to go. So I do commend her for the way that she went about it with me, and there was not enough blame to go around. It did nothing wrong. But
I think that you just nailed that too, because even when bringing students together, you want to create that safe, situation where they're not feeling judged, and you're giving both of them a voice to be able to share what happened, and maybe that's something that we talk or coach parents through, is that script where it's not putting the parent that you're calling in a place where they feel like they have to be defensive, right? It's where they can let that guard down and be willing to listen and consider, wow, maybe they did do something that wasn't nice, or said something, or, really hurt somebody, intentional or not intentional, but I need to hear what, this parent is sharing with me, so I can support my child, right? Because ultimately, those behaviors stop working at some point. And nobody wants that to happen to their child either, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. So
Yeah, and I think we're probably going to have to end it there because we're just a little over time already. And I really appreciate everybody being here tonight. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I'm really thrilled with how interactive it was. And there was a lot going on in the chat. We have recorded it. It will be posted on our social responsibility Facebook page for sure, and we'll find some other places to post it as well. And I'd like to maybe send it out by email to the people who registered as well, the recording. So we'll figure out how to get that done and get that to you guys. Thank you so much. And
I'd really like to thank Lucia and Shannon. Thank you for being with us, and to everybody that participated. And yeah, look for it to be posted. And I hopefully everybody got, so we have Lucia's contact information as well. And then we can also include Shannon's contact information.
great.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
Thank you.
happy birthday.
Do you want us to all sing to you?
No, I don't like attention. It's okay.
I know you don't. That's why I did that.
I know. Yeah, I know. 30 is hard. It's a hard year. But yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this was awesome. Take care, everybody.
Sure.
Bye.